Hey everybody, today I'm going to talk about the 1970 film MASH. And if this makes you think of the TV show from the 70s and 80s, then just throw that out the window because this film is a very different beast. And though this movie got off to a very shaky start with its two lead actors trying to get the director Robert Altman fired in the middle of production, it went on to be a surprise hit. MASH caused a giant splash when it hit the theaters in January 1970. Nobody had seen anything quite like this, and to many viewers it was just sensory overload. But it managed to offend much of conservative America. Protestants, Catholics, pro-military Americans, and just general adherents to good taste all found something offensive in this film. But there was no denying that this was a smash hit and a career breakthrough for Robert Altman. Though it's hard for us today to imagine a major Hollywood studio making a movie that so brazenly mocked the U.S. Armed Forces. MASH was made at a time in America that patriotism, respect for the military, and for authority in general was at a low ebb. Okay, MASH is a very strange film, and that is apparent right from the opening shots of these graceful Bell helicopters in the sky, carrying bloody, wounded men back from the battlefield, while an ironically poignant song about suicide plays in the background. If you're of a certain age, you would likely recognize this theme music instantly from the television series MASH, which was on TV seemingly every evening for about a decade. However, the original film song had lyrics which were, as far as I recall, missing from the TV series, and this alone conveys a very different feel to this film. This theme song, "Suicide is Painless," by the way, the lyrics were actually written by director Robert Altman's teenage son, believe it or not. What gives the film MASH its distinctive look and feel are the combination of its irreverent, disjointed style and its matter-of-fact realism. The overall effect is one of pandemonium, almost like the cinematic version of a medieval panorama, where there are many interactions happening at once, characters are talking over one another, and other characters are doing things in the background which are independent from the main action. And Altman made full use of the wide aspect ratio to depict the chaos of an Army field hospital. A lot of the dialogue in MASH was improvised. They only loosely adhered to the script in places, and some of the funniest lines are lines you overhear fragments of in the background. Other than a few of the main characters, most of the cast of MASH came from a San Francisco-based theater company. And so for most of them, this was their very first film. There are also a number of NFL football players in MASH, and they appear in this very long and very unsportsmanlike football game sequence toward the end of the movie. The other striking element of MASH is the scenes in the operating room tent. The first thing you'll notice is the blood. It is a bloody mess. There's blood all over the place. It's on the surgeons and on the nurses' hands, it's on their clothes, it's sometimes spurting out of the patients. They really took great trouble to get the color of the blood accurate for its varying stages of oxygenation and coagulation. The dialogue of the surgeons is remarkable also. It really captures the matter-of-factness of these overworked men who weren't really soldiers. They were just doctors who were called upon to put shattered bodies back together any way they could under primitive battlefield conditions. MASH has a very drab, dirty, dingy look that is common in war films today, but was not at all common back then, and this effect was intentionally created. MASH was based on the 1968 novel by the thoracic surgeon H. Richard Hornberger, who published this novel under a pseudonym and based it on his experiences serving as an Army surgeon in Korea. 20th Century Fox had decided to make this into a movie, but they had two other big-budget war movies going at the same time, which were Patton and Tora, Tora, Tora. And MASH was definitely the red-headed stepchild of these three. This film was offered to at least 12 directors who all turned it down, mainly because it didn't have a conventional plot. It was more like a bunch of comic vignettes strung together. So they finally found a director who was willing to take on this film in the name of Robert Altman. Now, unlike a lot of the well-known filmmakers from his era, Robert Altman did not get his start via some graduate film program. He was a guy who learned his craft on the job, making industrial training films in the 1950s, and then he spent a decade working in television. He had made a couple of films before MASH, but let's say he was not highly regarded by Hollywood movie studio executives, and he was sort of a desperation choice in this case. However, given that all the other directors didn't want to touch this thing, MASH turned out to be the perfect opportunity for Robert Altman to do what he wanted. In fact, Altman later said that MASH had not so much been released, but it was more like it had escaped, in the sense that he worked really hard to keep a low profile and to keep this film well under budget, so that he could avoid unwanted attention and internal censorship by 20th Century Fox. Altman had wanted to make the film about Vietnam, which was of course raging at that time, but the studio insisted for political reasons that MASH remain set during the Korean War. But other than that, Altman pretty much had his way with this film. The studio's consensus on MASH, to the extent that they paid attention to it at all, was that MASH was going to be a debacle and would probably skip the theatrical release and go straight to the drive-in theaters, which was where schlocky and low-quality movies ended up back in those days. Despite the apparent exotic filming location, MASH was actually shot at a kind of backlot for 20th Century Fox, located in the Santa Monica Mountains, about 20 miles from LA. And this area had a rugged appearance that made it a perfect stand-in for the Korean countryside. The success of MASH certainly was unexpected, given its inauspicious beginning, low studio expectations, and the fact that Donald Sutherland and Elliott Gould teamed up to try to get Robert Altman fired from this film during the filming. Elliott Gould did go on to make more films with Robert Altman, but Donald Sutherland never worked with Altman again, though he did credit Altman with giving his career a big boost. Okay, that's it for MASH. You have to check it out, even if you didn't care for the TV show, because it's really a different kind of thing. Thank you for watching. I'm Rod Richards. Until next time.